All right. So hold on, let me get the list.
I'm sorry if I threw you a curve. The agenda says roll call, so I thought that's what I was supposed to do. We do want to satisfy that we have a quorum.
Workshop, do we need one?
Pardon me, Margot?
Boy, I can't get away with saying anything under my breath, can I? And do we need a quorum for a workshop?
Yes, we
You
do.
don't,
Connie says
We
no.
do not.
you don't want a quorum for a workshop.
Yes, we do. Well,
It's a workshop. We can have a quorum, but I mean, we do
Okay.
have a quorum. There's 8 of us.
Oh, that's right. Okay.
So the question was, do we want a quorum? And yes, we do. And if we don't have a quorum, then we would discuss whether a council meeting, whether we would want to proceed without a quorum. That would be my preferred MO, because whatever we discuss tonight will be coming before the full council, and we certainly want as many members as we can informed.
So I have the list, and sorry I didn't have that available. I'll go ahead and read it off here. Just one second. Councilmember Andrews,
Here.
Councilmember Ellis,
Here.
Councilmember Francie, Councilmember Francie. No response. Councilmember Gordon. No response. Councilmember Cashman,
I'm here.
Councilmember Mackey. No response. Councilmember Meskis,
Present.
Councilmember Richrod,
Here.
Councilmember Ross,
Here.
Councilmember Shaw,
Here.
Councilmember Short,
here,
Councilmember Taylor. Councilmember Taylor. No response. Mayor Shave.
Here.
Okay,
Thank you.
welcome.
So this is essentially the Planning Commission and Director Lisa Scott's opportunity to share with us the work that has taken place so far this year on the update of our comprehensive land use plan. So Director Scott, if it's okay, I'm going to turn introductions and the presentation of the meeting over to you.
Thank you. I do want to make mention too that Monica Kuna, who is and Randy Ross, our planning commission two of our planning commission members, are here this evening. I did have a couple from the Historic Preservation Commission that said they were going to be here, so I'm expecting that they'll probably log on at some point through the meeting. So thank you very much. We have been working diligently on the comprehensive plan. We've gone through my mind just went completely blank. We went through 2 exercises where we looked at the housing chapter and the economic development chapter, I guess, and utilities and transportation. So we have been working in smaller groups to try to put together a draft to go out to the public. So with that, I'm going to introduce Rachel Miller, who has been our project manager lead for this with Makers, and she's been wonderful to work with. Her team has been fantastic, putting up with all of our crazy questions. And she's going to walk through kind of where we've been, what we've been working on, and where we're at today, and then where we're going to go. So with that, Rachel.
Sure. Thank you. Yes, and as Lisa mentioned, it's been really fun working with you all. So it goes both ways, Lisa. You know, what we had heard from you right at the very beginning was that land use and transportation was really important to you all, getting the synergy and connection between those, and housing and economics. And so just before we even get started, I wanted to say that those have been the really driving factors, figuring out housing, economic development, and land use and transportation connection. And that's what we're really going to get into tonight. But before I do, I see that Nick is on the call. And if Nick would like to introduce himself, that would be wonderful.
Thank you, Rachel. Good evening, Mayor and council members. Thank you for making the time to invite us to the workshop this evening. I'm Nick Bratton with Forterra. I'm the Senior Director of Policy at Forterra, and I work a lot in our land use policy field. So I've done a lot of work with communities in the Central Puget Sound and Northern Puget Sound on land use planning and incentives, things of that nature. So it's great to be back in Aberdeen, and we have an organizational connection in many ways here, having been involved in the TimberWorks project and community visioning and a handful of other things over the years. So my colleagues and I are looking forward to offering some of our perspective, and so far it's been very illuminating to hear the input and commentary and feedback from the community members. And I'll hand it back to you, Rachel.
Thanks, Nick. And then also we have Sam Brookham from Leland, our Economic Development Advisor. So Sam, if you could introduce yourself too.
Sure, thanks, Rachel. Hi, everybody. I'm Sam Brookham with Leland Consulting Group. We're based out of Portland, Oregon. We do anything from land use economics to real estate strategy and economic development. So yeah, really excited to be working here. It's again, we've been involved in the Grays Harbor area for on a couple of projects, this being the second in my tenure at Leland, and yeah, that's just about it. So I'll hand it back to Rachel.
Thanks. And Sam and Nick, please interrupt anytime. They are experts in what they do and can add a lot to the conversation. So please interrupt me and pipe in. I think the last time I was with you all, it was still just on phone, if I remember right. So it's good to see all your faces. Thanks for having us here. I'm glad to be here. And if I may, I'm going to share my screen and get into a little bit of a presentation, and then we'll mostly, hopefully, have a lot of conversation. Are you all seeing a PowerPoint looking type screen? Yes, good. Okay. So what we're hoping to get out of this conversation tonight is to remind you all what the comprehensive plan is all about, what the product might look like in the end, so where we're all headed, because right now we're still in the fuzzy conceptualizing phase, but just so we can kind of hone in on where we're headed. Also, the big thing is we want to understand your vision. We are working out this urban form concept map. And like I mentioned, that we're trying to figure out housing and market factors and really make the land use and transportation relationships sing. We want to hear your input on that tonight. And then you all took our draft survey. Thank you. Already it was fun reading your responses and seeing what we learned from you all. So we'll go over that tonight and how we can make the survey better before we put it out publicly. And then we'll talk about next steps, including when the survey will go out and how we can best publicize it and some other next steps. So where we are in the process, we're maybe about halfway through this schedule we created before COVID, actually. So it's not, we're following a slightly different process, but I would say we're still in this visioning and options phase, and we're about to do a really big public launch. We've had very good in-depth expertise from the focus groups we've worked with so far and the Planning Commission. And we're about to go to a broader audience with the survey and then hopefully a Zoom meeting. So as you can see, what we've completed so far is the kickoff types of things, the focus groups with a housing focus and economics focus, public works focus, and transportation. Sam completed a market and housing study with very insightful recommendations for what should make it into the comprehensive plan. And we did a focus group most recently, actually a two-part focus group that was really a charretter workshop, figuring out, what are the districts and centers in Aberdeen? And we'll talk a lot about that today. And you all saw the results of that in the survey. And then upcoming, we still have the whole plan to get together. So we have right after this, we're hoping to get a public launch going of these districts and centers and corridors, things, and the overarching principles and major assets and challenges that Aberdeen is facing. And then we'd like to confirm that map and confirm the goals. We do have a draft set of goals that the focus group has worked on with us. And then we still need to draft all the policies. We have a handful of them that have already started emerging, but we still need to fill all that in. And then more public engagement once we have more to show. And then the draft and final plan and the adoption process with you all and Planning Commission before that. So just a reminder about where we're headed. The comprehensive plan, you all are not required to do anything in particular for your comprehensive plan, but with working with the Planning Commission, this is what we've landed on what our structure will be. So we will likely have an introductory section that'll show the vision, the overarching vision and urban form concept, which is what the bulk of our meeting today is going to be about, that urban form concept. And then the framework goals, which you may not have noticed it, but on the survey, one of the opening questions was about what principles resonated with you. And that feeds right into our framework goals that are kind of at a higher level than all the ones that are more topic specific. And then for each element, land use, housing, capital facilities, utilities, transportation, and economic development, these are the ones we landed on. And a big focus, though, will be the downtown. We decided not to do a separate element on downtown, but that it would be integrated and infused, especially in land use and economic development. So to give you a little idea of what these urban form concepts are useful for, they really set the framework for how your town might develop over time or change over time, or how to be strategic about investments, or what is the character that's really going to draw people here and keep them here, and to differentiate unique areas of Aberdeen. So these are just some example maps. The one on the left is one we did for Marysville, and it highlights some major corridors and different areas that really had a different feel from each other. And so then that meant that they would have different strategies and different land use designations. The one on the right is one from Portland's comprehensive plan, and it does a really nice job of identifying different centers, and each center has different scales, just like downtown. Aberdeen is a really important center, and some other ones might be smaller scale centers. And then the corridors that connect between them, and in Portland especially, these green streets and open spaces and linking things, and the pedestrian and bicycle network and how that connects with the green environment as well. So ideally, through our work with Planning Commission, you all, the focus groups, and then after this survey, we'll have a really good sense of what people are feeling about the different areas of Aberdeen, and that we can form up a vision for each of them, and then have goals and policies that help to create those, and really make that connection between land use and transportation, and figure out where does it make sense for more housing to go if we know there's a housing shortage right now, which we do. And for economic development, what are the most impactful things that we can do downtown, or make it easier to renovate those buildings, or whatever the strategies are. So that's the end goal. How each element, so the land use chapter or the transportation chapter, might be organized. The introductory section could just be what this chapter is about, and then why is it important, and then get into the goals. Then the policy statements, and those won't need to be a one-for-one with the goals. They'll just be organized whatever way makes sense. And then some implementation. And I do want to note that, and Lisa, feel free to pipe in here, that comprehensive plans don't have to have implementation. They're really meant to be long-term guiding documents that you don't have to update your goals and policies all the time. They're meant to be good decision-making guidance that can survive. However, it can be very useful and important to identify a few key steps that are actionable and can be done or started within the year or 2 or 5 years. So what we're thinking at this time is maybe identifying a few key action items, and then it's something that Lisa And you all can check off the list, and as you need to, update just that section of the comprehensive plan, but you ideally wouldn't have to touch the rest. So you just have a little implementation section of really important things to tackle right away that you could update frequently. Did I get that right, Lisa? I think you're muted.
Just a sec, I did, I clicked and unclicked myself. So yeah, we need to remember that the comprehensive plan isn't an action plan. And I know a lot of people do better with an action plan with, you know, with set specifics on what you're going to do. But this is kind of our, as Rachel mentioned, our framework for our long range vision. That is our defensible document for, you know, through the hearings examiner, through rezones and conditional uses. And it's the thing that we use as staff to follow when we do get those requests in that might not be in an area that is where the vision's going for the future. So this is a good, really good document that we utilize a lot as staff. And I'm hopeful with the introduction of a few actionable items that this will also become a document that the community will use as well.
Thanks, Lisa. We have the image on the right just to remind that we're aiming for a really legible, aesthetically pleasing document that's easy to find your way in it. We hope that the thing will be pretty short and easy to pick up and actually enjoyable to read. That's hard to do in planning documents, but that's our goal. Okay, so just a reminder on goals and policies. You all know goals and policies, but just for our own sake, to remind us where we're headed, what makes good policy? Again, it's clear guidance in the long term so that you all and Planning Commission can make good decisions like what Lisa was just talking about. They should be understandable and easy to interpret, concise, action oriented, even though they're not specific actions right away, but clear what you're supposed to be doing there, and logical, of course. Uses plain language, uses active voice, and attainable and feasible. There's some example goals and policies on the right. And just to differentiate between the goals and policies and strategies and actions, they are at different levels. The goals are the really big picture, identifying long-term vision, broad statements, and they really endure across time. Policies describe what the city should be doing to implement those goals and what decisions would have to be made to get there. They should be specific enough so that you can know what decision to make when something comes at your desk. And they can be prescriptive when they need to be, like using words like require, or they can be quite flexible when you need to be flexible, and making the decision on those can be helpful. And then the strategies and actions, of course, those are the ones that are more like, you can check the box that you completed this thing. And they're not binding again, and they don't have to be done for comprehensive plans. So just a sample goal and a couple of policies. I'll let you all read through it if you would like. These are from Portland.
And Rachel, I will, for the council, I will send you this presentation via email so that you can have this to look at your leisure as well.
Okay, I don't think we have to dwell on that. And we'll get more into goals and policies down the road. Okay, the urban form concept. So again, what we're headed towards is something like the Portland urban form framework map on the right. And what we worked on with the focus group is the one on the left. And it's very sketchy, and Lisa was okay with that. We offered to clean it up and she said, no, it shows that it's in progress. It's process work. It's messy and shows that we're still listening to everybody. So we kept it. And this is what we presented to you all on the survey. So let me switch over. Are there any questions so far?
So can I talk about the districts really quick?
Yes.
Okay, so so this was a big part for the Planning Commission and the Historic Preservation Commission in trying to build neighborhood identity and sense of place with their own districts, so to speak. And this doesn't mean that this is what it's going to be, but this was their stab at taking a step at trying to identify neighborhoods, areas that would give people, as I mentioned, a sense of place. And it's easier to, when you look at districts as well, to create things within a district that might be different from another district, such as a particular use. So maybe this is just a thought, so don't shoot me, but like maybe in the Broadway Hill area, there's somebody that will have a little, neighborhood coffee shop along Broadway that you can walk to from your house or something along those lines. But that's kind of the concept they were looking at between the two commissions, and we wanted to try to encourage that. So when you see the districts, that's definitely not anything set in stone, but that was their first step at trying to be creative and bringing that forward.
Thank you. And just a little more background, if you can indulge me. What we showed to them, Planning Commission and some historic preservation members were there as well, was some of the great things about Aberdeen. So downtown, the fact that you've got a lot of tourists coming through and great transportation, a lot of waterfront, which a lot of people think is a really lovely amenity, proximity to natural areas. You all saw a lot of this summarized in the first couple questions on the survey. And there's a lot more, but I'm going to go through quickly so we can get to the main point. And then for major constraints and challenges, you're getting the levee, but there are some areas that still show up on the FEMA flood maps. There's some topography that just makes it a little harder for people walking, getting up and down the hill, and just connectivity. And challenging permitting along the waterfront, just complex. And the railroad, just the interface or compatibility between a pedestrian-oriented, human-oriented environment and the railroad. But the railroad is also a major asset. Then some opportunities. The levee is making a big opportunity for the whole downtown and nearby areas. The Armory area is seen as a major redevelopment type opportunity. The other area with redevelopment opportunity is South Shore Mall, and then also the waterfront area near the historic seaport, the Mill District area. Sam or Nick, remind me if I'm missing other major points from our background research or major economic opportunities, Sam. Sorry to put you on the spot.
I think you could call out the port there and the surrounding area. That's one of the things that we talked about. Specific opportunity, potentially expanding that slightly north for more of a mixed use or mixed employment style district. But other than that, I think you captured it.
Good. I'll just mark that here. Okay, so then we worked with the focus group and we asked them, where do you see a real center to a community? And it might be that there was already some kind of anchor there, like a park or a coffee shop or a historic building or just something already going on that could be a center or a draw. And it might not be there today. It might just be more that there's an opportunity for it. So that started the discussion, and then we kept the discussion going, and then even more in the historic preservation group weighed in on names and a lot of their study. They've really looked at these neighborhoods and understand a lot about their character and have brought in that sense of identity that Lisa was talking about. And then through all of those conversations, this was where we landed. So these are where we thought there were potential for real centers. One of the things that helped clarify where we might put centers, because we did actually talk about a lot more than this. But one thing about centers is that you want them to be in a walkable distance, and you want, but not so many of them that you're just spreading all the activity thin or everywhere. So they tend to be in traditional communities. And then when we really looked at Aberdeen, Lisa pointed it out, you know, Aberdeen actually developed with these centers. So pre-cars, cities tended to develop with neighborhood centers about a mile apart from each other. And so that meant that everybody in that area could walk to their grocery store or to, you know, their neighbor's house or whatever it is, within a 20-minute or less walk, ideally more like 10 to 15-minute walk. So that's where these came from. And that's why they're a little bit spread out, even though you might think of more centers. So another thing just to explain about the map is that the pink and purple mostly mark the center of activity. And then we did start sketching in some of these yellow areas. That's the whole broader district. So there's a little bit of a difference between the historic neighborhoods and then where their commercial center or civic center might be. And we don't have to identify the districts in the comp planner on this urban form map. So some of the comments we're talking about, you know, which one does it actually land? Where does the park actually land? And if it doesn't make sense to clarify that, we don't actually have to. But what we do want to have is a good center and a way of getting between the centers and to the centers. Okay, so here's where we are today for me to take notes on what you all mentioned, and I captured a few of the notes that were coming in from the survey. Again, thank you all for taking the time to take that. I think the way that I'll walk through this now is to switch over to the survey just for a second and check in on those first questions just before we dive into all of this. If I can get it to show up, it must be hidden behind all of you. Too many windows open. Let me pull this one down and see if it's hidden. Feel free to pipe in with questions or comments while I finally pull it over here. Okay. So just so that I can go in a logical order here, we'll follow the survey questions. Was there anything you all wanted to change about the first couple of questions that were about assets and challenges? The one thing that jumped out at me was this word fractured. I almost felt like it was overly negative. And if anybody has any good ideas, let me know. Or if you were fine with it, then that's also fine.
I actually kind of noticed the same thing. I was like, fractured? We're not really we're not broken.
Right, right.
But we are kind of separated, but we share a lot of assets. So, we are kind of, the same community with 3 separate governments. So,
yeah,
I think a different synonym would be fantastic.
You use the word separate, and I think that captures it. Is that it?
I think that works way, way better.
Thank you. For some reason, we didn't have the brain power to get there when we were drafting it, but thank you. We needed you. Okay, overall, I don't think I got many comments on things to edit here, so I'll go ahead and keep moving. These were the principles that we asked you about that feed directly into the overarching framework goals that would, any of the goals that we have in the land use or transportation or capital facilities or anything, would all try to keep these in mind and make sure that whatever we propose there doesn't go against these and actually tries to foster and build these. So if there's anything you would like to edit here, the survey didn't give an open-ended question. So this would be your chance. We can also email this out and you can send edits in after the meeting.
I
Will there be
personally
a,
like, go ahead, Alan.
oh, all right. Well, there will be an opportunity to respond directly to all of you guys. I would assume. I mean, the reason what's happening is I'm forming a response letter in my head already. It's already 2 pages, so you know.
Okay, we'll look forward to that.
Okay.
So I was just going to say, you mentioned there's not an open-ended question for this particular item, and I think that's probably okay because some things could get, I mean, you could get people writing paragraphs on some of these. So I think, you know, some questions, you know, not having that open-ended question at the end.
Okay.
'Cause I think I only put something into, you know, a few of those because the what was in that part of the survey actually, you know, had everything that I would want to actually contribute to, and I really couldn't think of anything else to add. So, yeah.
So I would just add that, you know, the survey is just still kind of recent in our heads and we're just seeing the results now. So I would just share that it's kind of hard for me to come up with feedback on the fly when I'm just seeing the results of the survey I just took. So I mean, it's a big plan and it's supposed to be comprehensive. So I'm a little reluctant to say something that might go down and be carved in stone until I have a chance to think about it.
Sure. Okay,
Rachel, this is Liz.
yeah.
Could you add under resilience, physical and social infrastructure? I want to get the economic element into there as well.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good catch.
And Rachel, so the feedback too that we might look for tonight is things that may have worked really well within this questionnaire, things that maybe we can look to improve before we put this out to the public, that'll make it maybe a little bit easier for people to respond, because the more we get, the better off we will be.
Yeah, that's a good point, Lisa. We're not meaning to get in the weeds today, but if there's any red flags, I did want to give you the opportunity since this one didn't have a way to comment on it. Sounds like it's good enough for today. Okay, so back to the neighborhood maps. First of all, just looking out from the broad picture, do you all feel like we captured the right centers? Or did anything strike you as seeming kind of off?
I put this in my comments, but I was trying to see if it made sense to pool North Aberdeen from the east side of the Wishkah over to the west side of the Wishkah, at least up to the toe of Arnold Hill.
So across the river.
Yeah, because they have similar residential qualities in some respects, and then that would be differentiated from the East End, East Commercial area.
So pool North Aberdeen and Arnold Hill and the whole B Street corridor into one.
The one thing I will say is that in the historic preservation plan, Arnold Hill is separated out as a historic district.
Yeah, and Arnold Hill should stay itself, but extend North Aberdeen up to include Bench Drive and everything except Arnold Hill.
I understand what you mean now. Okay.
Does this pink capture Bench Hill? Is that the section farther north?
Yeah, it's a little farther north, and I will work with you on that to get that map link, so
I-
it's included in there.
One thing I wonder about that is that I feel like if you're living east of the river, you would want a center that's easy to get to. But we've also heard that the B Street corridor is kind of a big opportunity for change or higher densities. And we could have two centers, but this actually feels like one unified area. We could also add a survey question that just asks, does this feel like one unified area, or does it seem like it's two separate areas?
Well, I would just say, I don't see how you can have, you know, a neighborhood separated by a river with no bridge, but I agree with the idea that Arnold Hill is almost its own unique historical neighborhood connected more to Sam Ben Park than it is to the B Street corridor. And that whole B Street corridor out to Bench Drive is more of an identity than B Street to Arnold Hill.
Okay, so what I heard there was more that, let me find another color. So Arnold Hill and Sam Ben, which I think is over there more by Broadway Hill, right?
Yeah.
Broadway Hill,
green there.
Sam Ben is like right in the middle and serves both of Broadway and Arnold Hill.
Yep.
Yeah,
It's the
yeah.
connector.
yeah. And then you were saying that B Street corridor is actually more like this?
You can drive the B Street corridor every day of your life and never go up Arnold Hill. So,
Yes.
right.
Yeah.
Okay.
I have two.
Josh.
Pardon me, Joshua?
Yeah, oh, sorry, yes. I've got two things. The name Wishkah/East End could be confused with the Wishkah Valley and Wishkah area past B Street.
Yeah.
The original thought behind that was that, believe it or not, that's the original plat of Wishkah, is the whole west end. So you're absolutely right. But we wanted to, you know, that was the whole question, is do we pay homage to that past history, or do we create something new?
Interesting, like a original Wishkah.
It was the plat
It
of
was the
Wishkah.
city of Wishkah or something,
Yeah, it was the
right?
plat of Wishkah. Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
And my
Yeah,
other
so
one is
most definitely, you're right. It can be confusing. And so that's a good question.
yeah, maybe
We
like an
noticed
old
that that
Wishkah
was
or
not-
Wishkah.
Yeah. We noticed that Wishkah was not a popular response on the survey.
Yeah, I was just gonna say,
That
I
makes
think,
sense. There's the other area.
you know, for, gosh, as long as I've been in Aberdeen and in all my years describing that side, I've always just called it East Aberdeen. And it's pretty comprehensive in terms of what all that took in.
Yeah.
You're right. Most
I
people
will
do
say-
resonate with that.
Yeah. I will say we got a lot of good ideas from the 10 people that took the survey on the names. And I think we'll just take those. I'll check with Lisa first, but I think we'll take those and add them to the potential survey responses so that people can note those also.
That'd be great. Yep.
Yeah.
My other concern is the big circle that is my neighborhood, but doesn't have a name. Because I live between the port and Scammell Hill and Prairie Creek West End and downtown.
Yes. You're bringing us to the biggest question of the day.
No man land.
Thank you, Joshua.
Let's just go right there. Yeah. Okay, so all I put was lots of questions because there's so many. Yeah, so it's really been interesting to learn about that area. And then also a little bit, I'll just mark it here for a second and then erase it, but along the waterfront near between the port and downtown. We had originally heard that there was opportunity for that area to be residential and make use of water views, but maybe we misinterpreted that and it was actually just the mill district we were talking about or other areas. But as we dug into that with the focus group and with Planning Commission, we realized, you know, it doesn't really work. The port needs those railroads. There's a lot of them. It's a very narrow area. There's very complex permitting. It's in use, it's industrial. The area just north of it is commercial. along Highway 101 and the streets that extend from there. So it's pretty challenging for residential along the waterfront. And then we've also heard that the port is growing and could need some space for expansion, or at least related uses and supportive uses. Also, that train traffic is increasing. And so right now there is an open space, a little open space buffer between the railroad tracks and the existing residential neighborhood. But one thought is, does it make sense for there to be more commercial light industrial type uses on the other side of the tracks? And there are two areas that we can ask this question for, and we actually would like to know from you all, can we add this directly on the survey? So we have a draft question that we'd like to go ahead and add. And it's about two different areas, the area that's circled in black right now, and then this Fries Creek area between Myrtle and what's the other one that I'm thinking of?
Oak.
Map. Oak, thank you. Yeah, Maple and Myrtle. Or yes, specifically Oak and Myrtle. Yeah. So let me pull up the draft survey question.
So can I just, so one of the challenges that we had in with the Planning Commission, and I know Monica and Randy are on too, is that where do we provide room for growth in Aberdeen? If we wanted to grow our commercial, if we wanted to grow our industrial, and we want to grow our residential. So those were kind of the areas that we were looking at. And for more on the light industrial side of things, or the industrial, it's become clear that we need to be close to the railroad, which kind of takes South Aberdeen out of the equation for anything that may need a deeper draft or rail. And so we were parts of the West End we looked at that may be just north of the railroad tracks that might make sense for growing our economy that way. They're all challenging questions, and obviously they can, that's a big change. But those are some of the conversations that we want to have, and what we want to, where we want to grow and where we can grow. So that's kind of led us to some of these interesting conversations and trying to figure out where that could work.
Yeah.
This is Liz. I'd like to make a comment on the rail expansion and looking for places to add more light industrial. I think it's helpful to pull our vision out in scope, perhaps, and look at not just Aberdeen, but Aberdeen Hoquiam, because Hoquiam has so many opportunities for industrial of various, whether it's light or heavy, and along the railroad tracks, without impacting the housing that is in Josh's neighborhood. And I think having that housing is super valuable, and it's a question for us to get some feedback on, which really is more valuable in the long run. What do we want to see that look like down the road? These vibrant neighborhoods, or neighborhoods bumping up against potentially light industrial commerce.
One of the thoughts that I had, actually, this is another, way of asking the question that I had, is to what extent does the comprehensive plan specifically acknowledge the changes that might come to our community as a result of the levy? Because we are supporting the levy with the very real intent and purpose of growing our economy. And what kind of growth do we envision? What kind of growth are we hoping will come as a result of the levy? one of the things that we know for sure as a result of the levy is a tremendous burden on our homeowners will be lifted. To what extent do we envision more commercial or other development coming because those flood restrictions are lifted? And one thing have we identified in there, what's not filled in? I mean, right now we've had a decade and a half of people pulling out and leaving things behind. So how do we make sure what's already light industrial commercial gets colored in before we start maybe identifying other areas that might help economic growth?
One of the other things I wanted to add too is, which we haven't dove into at all, and that's the sea level rise and planning for the future. Probably not my generation, but the next generations to come. And we were envisioning that the residential growth would happen more on the hill than maybe down in the flats. So, that was also one of the thoughts behind potentially having room to grow the light industrial area as well.
When we were talking about the areas, Josh brought up the West End, where it's circled in black. I see where that was described as port area. And I don't know anybody who's ever thought of that as port area, but maybe it is. But a natural boundary, it just a suggestion, a natural boundary to the port area could be Bay Avenue. And because that Bay Avenue runs right straight into the port area or the port road. So if you notice on this map here, where's Bay Avenue? There it is. If you follow it west, it goes, or northwest, it goes right to the river and Holcomb through the port area. So
Right.
I don't know. Everybody that I talked to thought, what? We're not the West End? And so I don't know. I don't know what you were thinking, Josh, but
And when you say people thought they were the West End, you're talking about all the residences between 101 and the port? Or do you
Yeah,
mean specifically?
Yeah,
one
that
side
is
of
what we
Okay.
refer to the West End as, yes.
Yeah.
you know, we have the old Hopkins School in that area. And right up on the corner here at 101 was the Ice Palace. I mean, you know, I don't know what we're thinking of doing here, but those were historic landmarks.
Well, and AJ West School is right on Bay Avenue.
Exactly.
One of the things to remember is, again, that we accommodated a tremendous amount of industrial activity, and all of these neighborhoods existed during that time. So where was that activity taking place, and how do we fill that back in before we start identifying neighborhoods that are going to, you know, be possibly changed?
I also think I need to look back at what was used on the survey, because I don't think we intended for this area that's circled in black to come across as part of the Port District on the survey. So I need to check that graphic. If you see the yellow circles, they were more what we thought were, you know, the yellow closer to Fry's Creek was part of Fry's Creek in the West End, and the yellow around here would be a little closer to Scammell Hill as their neighborhood center.
I would say the highway kind of breaks Scammell Hill area off and just Scammell Hill, and everything else is like downwards from Scammell Hill. in the
Yeah.
West End area.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah,
I
so
don't know,
it was
Jared,
like the resident-
I live up by the hospital and I have thought of myself as living in the West End for years because
Yeah.
I'm west of Park Street. So-
Yeah, I'm
so-
hearing this is really one neighborhood here. That all this stuff is the West
Yeah.
End,
Yep,
or perceived as the West End.
and it's all
Um,
impacted by the same creeks and everything, drainage. It's all part of,
But we were also trying, when we were doing the Fry Creek restoration, we were trying to create a district from all of that work that's going to be taking place as well. Whether we end up going that direction, I don't know, but that was what we were working with Forterra on, is revamping that. So we put that on there thinking it would, maybe be its own little separate niche within the West End.
Mhm. One thing I wanted to mention about the Scammell Hill neighborhood is, yes, it's a strong neighborhood north of Highway 101, but there's not that much in walking distance, and Highway 101 does have commercial activity on it and could be an opportunity for a little neighborhood center, or at least closer to that area. So that was one of the ideas, that you have a little center, but there's a lot of residences that need to be nearby to support that. We could
Well,
drop,
and fucking the Ralph Larson and John Cernata and some of the other kind of go-getters on that end of town. Joshua Francie and I are both Ward 5, which is considered the commercial downtown, but we've considered the commercial district, what I mentioned this in the survey, what I call the West Corridor, which starts at Alder Street and it goes west clear to Myrtle, and it's that center between the two one-ways. And that's not even residential anymore, that's commercial. So that, that would be where the activity could go for, like the new clinic that's going in. I mean, that's a kind of a low impact sort of a industry to get in there. And that, that separates it from residential areas on both sides.
Yeah, I'm just a couple of blocks into the downtown area myself, but I'm right on the edge, right on the division where the orientation of the streets goes from Riverwise to North and Southwise.
Yeah, division is kind of the Yesler way of Aberdeen, just takes off on it.
so I'm hearing that the Highway 101 Sumner area is really a commercial center for the whole West End.
Right.
And maybe we don't need two commercial centers here. What I don't want to do is just circle the whole thing. Sam, correct me if I'm wrong there, but I think we want to identify places of like more really strategic places of activity, spreading the energy thin. There may be commercial activity there, but I think having one center is more realistic. So any thoughts? Well, first I see Sam came off mute, so I'll let Sam talk.
Oh, I was just gonna agree in terms of sort of retail gravity and market support for different commercial uses. I think we do certainly want to just concentrate on a few major centers and sort of think about it in terms of like a hub and spoke type approach.
Yeah.
Your main retail and commercial gravity will be downtown and potentially to the south as well. But then I agree, being quite deliberate about having those more sort of satellite, more neighborhood serving uses will be important. And there's only a certain amount of, unless the residential density really explodes, the demand is just not going to be there. So yeah, just to back up what Rachel said.
And so thanks, Sam. And so just stepping back again, the major opportunities we saw were, of course, downtown. Downtown should probably be the biggest circle on there. Maybe I should correct that. And then South Aberdeen, that mall area, and especially connected to the college, seem to be another major opportunity and potential for higher density mixed use development. Same with the Mill District, but a little less so. And then Fry Creek was actually our next center. And we thought there was a lot going on in this area and west to Hoquiam actually as well, like with that stadium over there and everything. I'm thinking maybe the Scammell Hill one needs to be a smaller one. Maybe that's what solves this. So that really what this is you've got a lot of residential area. They mostly support Broadway Hill and Fry Creek or West End, and that there's just a little satellite near Highway 101.
I think as long as it's mentioned, just because the Scammell Hill, Broadway Hill, Arnold Hill were our three historic housing districts that were significant for us. So that I think still is an important thing too. And I think that's why we had it on there.
Okay.
But are we discounting East Aberdeen as commercial? I mean, Walmart's there and that's where people go.
You're right. Should we call that one? That's like a regional hub. Yeah. It's not right now a very mixed use hub. It doesn't really have the residential and density, population density, but it does sure have a lot of regional commercial. So yeah, should I mark that one as bigger?
It does have residential to the north, just on the other side, but it's small area.
Yeah.
Well, I think we should recognize that if we go ahead with the East Aberdeen, what is it called now? I can't remember. The East Aberdeen Mobility Project, that the entire, that whole East Aberdeen area is one area that probably is going to transition.
Yep.
Whether we identify it or not, once that mobility issue is solved, what residential is there is probably going to get sucked up into commercial.
Okay, tell me that again. I'm not sure that I know. I don't know that I'm up to speed.
Chris kind of updated us at the transportation plan. Sorry, Deanne, go ahead.
No, Lisa, you probably explain it better than I can.
Well, we have an East Aberdeen mobility project that's coming in where we went through a preferred alternative analysis, but what it's doing is to try to create a separation from the road and the rail, and by having an overpass that goes into the commercial areas on either side, and with a roundabout, so people can come through on Highway 12 easier, and then be able to access over the rail tracks without having to interfere with the railroad and their transportation of goods and services, which is really important because that can back up a lot of things in town when that happens.
Right now, Rachel, one of the things holding back development in East Aberdeen is the fact that the trains can sit there for 20 some minutes and people feel trapped. If anything happened, they couldn't get out.
Yeah.
And so there's a huge project to make sure that there is more traffic safety there.
Yeah.
Which then is going to probably make it more possible for people to think about doing commercial over there on that end of town.
Okay.
And you have seen the commercial transition further north in East Aberdeen than was maybe traditional in the past. So that was, I know the Planning Commission had identified that area as potential for retail. Again, you are encroaching into some neighborhoods, and there's some beautiful waterfront property along the Wishkah River there as well. So it just, it's just a little bit of challenging from the landmarks. The rail's not going to go anywhere. The hillside's there and the river's there, so it's very limited.
It's constrained in a lot of ways, physically by the water, also by the traffic of 101, also by the railroad. Fortunately, it sounds like the constraint of the railroad is becoming less. There's not a lot of space for housing. I'm assuming the green areas are going to stay green. So yes, it's an important regional hub, and maybe it gets a different colored circle. I think the Portland map actually did differentiate between types of hubs and spokes. So yeah, I think it could get a bigger circle, but be a different color.
Did anybody look at the ownership of all of this property in this study so far? The property along the Wishkah River and such? Back here, because I might be wrong, but I was thinking when Walmart first located here where they're at, that they bought up a lot of this property between the highway and the Wishkah River.
Nope. They have not, they don't own anything over there as far as I know.
Okay. Well, that would have changed a lot too. So that's why I brought it up there.
It's been a long time, but I know when Home Depot was originally looking here, they did look to that area north of 101 in East Aberdeen. And there at that point in time, there were over 50 individual property owners. I think that's not as much today, but that's what the last count was at that point.
Okay. My pen has stopped working. What else?
Is there anything after you all have taken the survey, is there anything that you think we should change on the survey that would make it easier for folks to respond? Is there something they're missing?
Yeah, this is Liz. And for the first few questions about, do you think the boundary is accurate or needs to be changed, there was an accompanying picture of the area. And then for the next few districts or areas, there was no accompanying picture. And I think there needs to be for each set of questions that pertain to a specific area.
Thank you.
I actually had a slight issue with the legend on the map because the colors on the legend were not correlating very well to what was actually on the map. So it was kind of difficult to see what the legend was actually referring to. And I kind of started ignoring it. It's like,
it refers to the colors that are underneath. It's not the colors. We'll cut the legend off. It's not useful.
yeah, that was like, it was really confusing because I'm looking at all these circles going, these are not the same.
That's what that is. This is why we do draft surveys.
And see, Nathan, you get the award for paying attention to that because I didn't even pick that one up.
Excuse me, may I ask one thing now? I'm Frank Gordon, I'm one of the councilmen, but I've seen so little of this paperwork. I'm just sitting here listening, and it's really hard to ask some real clear questions when we haven't seen anything yet. It's all brand new to us sitting here. And so I would sure like to see some paperwork given to me, if I may.
Okay, we can do that.
Was there anything else on the survey that, again, that you think is missing or you'd like to see changed, tweaked a little bit that we might have missed?
I don't remember the specifics, but I do remember thinking along the way, I wish there were more options for allowing for input to tweak some of the sentences that were like, do you agree or not agree?
Okay, there were a couple questions. Most of them were yes, no, or yes with some updates, and then you were supposed to fill in what the updates were that were needed. I'll look back and see if there were any that were more like yes, no. So we'll take a look for that.
I had similar concerns.
Okay. You know, I want to go back to some of these blue circles we made earlier, and I'd like to wrap up if we're making an edit today or if we're adding questions. I think what I heard is that we will keep them separate. There were enough comments about the river separating them and that there's only one bridge between the North Aberdeen and Arnold Hill, and just the strong identity of Arnold Hill and the identity of B Street corridor are different enough and separated enough that we can keep both centers. But then there was a little bit of conversation also about B Street and Arnold Hill being quite different. Now that we've talked through a lot more of these centers and surrounding districts, and knowing that we're trying to highlight just some key places where activity might kind of center and people might go and meet their neighbors there, but that there is a broad residential area that's supporting that. Do these make more sense now, or should we still make some edits in that area?
Well, one of the things that might, this is Deanne Shaw, one of the things that might help you understand Aberdeen better is to know where our grade schools are located. People identify very strongly via their neighborhood, via the grade schools, and we have 5 of those. And we used to have 6, but in the West End, one of them got split between AJ West in the West End and McDermott in the Broadway Hill area because of declining enrollment. But all of these areas that you identified as different neighborhoods all uniquely identify with a specific elementary school, except for the Arnold Hill and North Aberdeen area, because Arnold Hill, despite its beautiful historical homes, is again kind of split down the middle on whether it identifies with McDermott Elementary School or Robert Gray Elementary School, because right up F Street is the dividing line between those 2 neighborhood schools. So that's why you're probably sensing a little bit of, I don't know, identity issues on the council on where Arnold Hill actually fits in, because it is actually served very clearly by 2 of our grade schools.
That's interesting. Maybe the name is really problematic, because Arnold Hill is really the central neighborhood that does not really have its own commercial center, right?
Right.
And like you all were saying, is very connected to Sandbend Park. And
But if you live on Arnold Hill, you can go down the hill to B Street and get your services, or you can go down the hill to downtown. I bike around town quite a lot, and you can get almost anywhere in Aberdeen within the space of a mile and a half. So it's not like a neighborhood without a little, service center is not going to have access to anything.
I think that calling it Arnold Hill has caused too much confusion here. And I think we should call it B Street on the map, so we get people located in the right spot, unless we think that Arnold Hill really is it, although I think that's too close to Broadway to be.
You know what, Rachel, what if we did with Broadway Hill, Arnold Hill, and Scammell, because since those were historic, because maybe they're just historic. I mean, maybe there is a historic Arnold Hill, or maybe they're a different color on the map to designate that. I know it was important for the Historic Preservation Commission to have those neighborhoods recognized, because those were the 3 called out in the plan.
I wonder if it's a separate map, because it's those historic districts are really the residential areas for the most part.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And the downtown was another one.
That would be a great overlay map.
Yeah.
Okay.
You're right. And that might take the confusion away.
Yeah.
Could we add like Arnold Hill and B Street, or would that be too confusing?
Oh yeah, we could do Arnold Hill,
Arnold
just
Hill
like we have multiple names on some of them. Arnold Hill / B Street. Yeah, I like that. Okay.
And I think Councilmember Francie is right. People will know exactly what you're talking about.
Okay, good. And Lisa, I know you rattled them off. The historic districts are Arnold Hill, Broadway Heights, and Scammell Hill,
Yeah,
right?
Broadway Hill, Scammell Hill, Arnold Hill, and downtown were the 4 districts.
Okay.
But the 3 residential were the hills.
Right, right.
They are historic. It's the sawdust aristocracy.
Yes, and one of the things I'd like to pin Michael Hauser down, who's the head of the historic preservation, is that he thinks that we have some of the largest neighborhoods intact outside of Seattle for historic preservation. So
wow,
that's a big thing.
Very cool.
And we don't do enough, I know, that there's so many enough hours in the day. We don't do enough to recognize that. So that's why we're hoping to get a little extra kick from the comp plan to recognize that as well.
Yeah, yeah, that's
And
right.
none of those districts fit within a circle.
Right, because the circles really are the commercial node or something that's got an anchor that's the kind of collecting where people would go to get together.
And Deanne was right. That would make, what we could do is take the boundaries from the historic preservation plan, and it would make a wonderful overlay on top of the map. And I think she hit that right on the head with that. Might take as well.
Okay.
So I'm pretty sure people living on Arnold Hill aren't up there waiting for a coffee shop.
No.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure if this is the right place or the right juncture to ask my question, but I was looking for clarification because I'm a little confused. At the beginning, you said the decision was made to not have a separate focus on downtown in the comprehensive plan, but it looks like downtown is identified. So I'm not sure what you meant by that because, man, this downtown is a priority.
Thank you. You've actually given me an easy question to answer. We're not doing an element that is titled downtown. So an element is a chapter of the comprehensive plan. So the downtown is a major focus, and actions and strategies and policies and goals for the downtown will be infused throughout, especially in the land use chapter, or element is what it's called in the comprehensive plan, and the economic development element. Does that make sense?
Because we do have a Main Street Association, which of course works with the National Historic Trust and all of that. And is all of that going to be recognized and part of the roadmap we follow in our comprehensive plan? Will be directed to stay on track with all that? Okay.
Yeah, we can add that in if it's not already showing up in the goals and a couple of policies that are being collected.
Thank you.
Of course. Thank you.
Okay. Should we?
Okay. Yeah. Any other major thoughts here? Otherwise, I'm going to switch back and move on towards next steps.
Where are we going to see this? We talked about the survey a lot. Were we actually going to see what we as a council kind of said?
I incorporated the questions that you all asked into our discussion today. Do we want to see the results? I'm happy to pull them up. I have them here if you want to. And that's another question I was going to talk with Lisa afterwards with is because we are updating the survey, we can't really use these results. When we edit the survey, it's really hard to match the old results with new ones. So when it goes public, it'll be a new version of the survey, and we're probably going to wipe the data clean. We'll of course save your data, but we'll wipe it clean most likely if Lisa's okay with that plan.
I was just trying to stay on the agenda because it said that we would see the results. That's all. But if that wasn't, no, that's
well,
okay.
Let me pull
Whatever
them up.
works.
I've got them. I have them. If you all are curious, I'm happy to. I find survey results really fun too. Let me get to the top. Okay, do you want to see your words? I'm just going to flip through because there are 3 of these. There was one that caught my eye. When I get to it, I'll read it. I really like that most of them are very
What do
positive.
we love about Aberdeen? Can you go back
What's
up?
that?
What do we as a council love about Aberdeen?
That's the next one.
Oh, I thought you went by it already. Oh, there it is.
Here it is. I'm sorry about how SurveyMonkey cuts off the words, but hopefully you can get the thought here and I'll scroll down if not.
Rachel, is it possible to send the results to?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Thank you.
I don't want to bog everybody down because I know that there's another presentation
Right.
after ours tonight too, so.
Do you want me just to do that, Lisa? Just send the
Yeah,
results?
is that okay? We do that, send the results out?
Yeah, I think that'll work
That's
better
fine.
than to spend a lot of time going over them tonight.
Okay. In terms of next steps, we are fleshing out, as you can see, that vision, the draft plan concepts and options, and we'll be in this phase through August. So we do want to make the edits to the survey and get that out and get a Zoom meeting scheduled so that it's a broad community-wide way to input and figure out what people are thinking about Aberdeen and what they really want to see.
So I
in
wanted
the
to throw
guiding
out there too, Rachel, that one of the things we'd like to do is put together a flyer / ad to go in the paper, to go on the radio, to go in the utility bills, online, just directing people of where they can go to fill that out to help guide that and try to get as much participation as we can. And though that survey will again help us guide those principles and goals.
We do also find that once people have taken the time to take a survey, it gets their interest piqued and they feel like they're invested. So they're actually more likely to be more involved later in the project as well.
Could some of those surveys be available translated into Spanish? Like if someone was to access a survey online, there would be a translate button to get a Spanish version?
I wish. That is unfortunately not possible with SurveyMonkey. Sometimes we do get it translated and put up another version. But I don't know what SurveyMonkey did, but they don't allow you to just use the free Google Translate. I don't know how they managed to do that. It has very much frustrated me that there's no free translation option there.
We can try to work in-house and see if we can come and try to work on that.
Yeah, that would be wonderful if we could get a Spanish version up. We'd be happy to do that.
We will try.
Okay, so then following this round of engagement and community conversations, I should also mention that it's not just this urban form map. We do need to get into the goals and draft policies as well. And I was just talking with Nick and brainstorming what the best ways are to get engagement on all these disparate topics. So we'll talk more with Lisa about this, but we really thought the focus groups earlier were very successful. Having special topic groups and maybe a way to tackle different topics in a more manageable way to break out pieces. Otherwise, it can be pretty overwhelming to look at 100 policies across a big document all at once. So trying to make it manageable and easy for people to engage in what they're interested in and feel like they want to give input on. September and October, hopefully we're refining the plan at that point. And this is what I was just talking about, is when we'd really want to be talking to more people and how that second round then should go, looking at the draft plan. And then hopefully working with you all again towards the very end of the year. What am I missing, Lisa?
So when do you think we will have a draft out that where we're trying to get a very rough draft out, because we think it'll be easier to get feedback from our citizens on that draft than to just come up with goals and policies out of the blue. So when do you think we'll get that first draft out to really get the creative juices flowing? from our
Yeah.
secretary?
I think we do have a few updates that'll take us a little bit to complete. And I think we would definitely have it to you within a week and maybe even earlier.
Cool. And that's where we really want to start getting people engaged. It'll be easier for them, I think, to really take a look at it and say, hey, that makes sense. Oh, really, that doesn't make sense. So I'm excited to kind of get that out. The focus groups have been great in steering that. We've had members of the community participate in those, as well as city council. In the port was a big part of that. So the PUD, the college, the hospital, the school district. So it's been nice to have people participate in that.
There's a question about the adoption process. Does a plan go to the planning commission to conduct public hearings, and then they button it all up and present it to the city council for additional hearings and adoption, or how does that work?
Planning Commission will make a recommendation to forward it to City Council, where you will hold the hearing. So it's an ordinance change to update the comp plan, since it's part of the code. And so we'll go through the readings of the ordinance for that and the public hearing. We're a little bit different since we don't plan undergrowth management, so we don't have to have all those public hearings, but we'll be conducting public meetings and getting as much input as possible. We could also do a rollout to city council prior to bringing the ordinance forward, so we can, have a public meeting and accept feedback. Then we can do the public hearing as part of the ordinance process, however you want to do that. We're only required to hold the one public hearing, though.
And I would just like to ask going forward that that all council members get notices about the planning commission meetings and any focus groups and everything. We would have to be mindful to not have a quorum at any meetings, but I think it'd just be really important for council members to be know about the meetings so that they can go if they need to.
Okay. I can do that. I think the planning commission meetings will be solely focused completely on the comp plan for the remainder of the year. So we'll definitely include that. So yeah, thank you.
Nick and Sam, if there's anything you'd like to add or something that I misrepresented from your work or anything, please feel free to pipe in and let me know.
Thanks, Rachel. I think that was a great overview and great discussion. I really appreciated hearing the both the sort of the micro scale focused commentary from the council, as well as some of the big picture directions. So I think that'll be helpful as we start to refine the plan. As we kind of move into further focus groups for gathering feedback on specific elements. We requested suggestions broadly before to cast a wide net and get really good representation from the community. So we're hearing a wide range of voices. And if there are any additional recommendations that you have for individuals or groups or constituencies that we should be thinking about talking to, I would certainly welcome those suggestions.
Thanks, Nick.
And Rachel, I didn't have anything to add, but I would echo what Nick just said. I think we've had a really good process thus far in terms of soliciting all sorts of different viewpoints and frameworks in which we can develop an actionable comp plan. I know that's an oxymoron in many ways, because we are not developing an action plan, but in many ways we want to set up Aberdeen to undertake actions and be realistic in the next 10, 20 years. So that's all I had.
Thank you, Sam. I have a very minor side note that if anybody has lovely photos or photos of artwork or artwork itself, that they would like to be cover pages for chapters in the comp plan or anything like that. We are looking for things that make the Aberdeen plan look like an Aberdeen plan.
Those whose projects for pictures win will have their district named after them. No, just kidding.
Or if anybody's written a poem about Aberdeen, we could have a little call out box. I mean, get creative. This is your plan. Make it beautiful. Is my thought.
Maybe
How about music?
How would, yeah, it's going online. Let's.
Would you say
Murals, like
Murals.
the immigration mural, the
very important? You're absolutely
the
right.
leaf whoops.
Murals.
If anybody's got good photos of them, send them our way. We'll start collecting them.
I'll get our Aberdeen group to send those because they put the brochures together for the murals and art.
Oh, yeah, that's great.
Good. Excellent.
Thanks.
So Director Scott, are we wrapping this up? Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes, we are.
Well, Ms. Miller, thank you so much for coming tonight, and for Sam and Nicholas. We have been looking forward to this. I have tried myself several times to get to some planning commission meetings, and just, the stars didn't align, and, COVID and notifications and everything. I went a couple of times and the meeting had been changed. So thank you for coming tonight. This has been great. And I look forward to upping the pace and council staying informed, and we'll look forward to more updates. So thank you.
Thank you so much. It's really been a pleasure talking with you all and learning from you all.
And do any council members have any last questions before we let our guests go back to their dinner or whatever? Well, I don't see any questions from the council. Mayor Shave, do you have anything?
No, I just want to thank everybody for being here and taking the time to do this, Rachel and Sam and Nick, and putting this all together. So thank you very much.
It's a really big effort and we appreciate it.
It's our pleasure. Thank you all.
Thank you. So next on our agenda is a presentation on the Regional Fire Authority, yet another very large planning initiative that our city has undertaken. And we have some consultants from the RFA, and without saying too much more, I think I'll just turn it over to Chief Tom Hubbard to bring us up to date on the Fire Authority.
Thank you very much. I'm going to see if I can make this work. So are you seeing a full screen or individual slides?
It's not a full screen yet. Go up to slideshow.
Yeah, go.
On your orange bar, middle of the screen is slideshow on your menu up there.
I am not seeing slideshow.
Between
Take your
animations
cursor-
and review.
Take your cursor over to the left, and then in the middle of the, I'll slide to the right a little. After it's got, can't read it, I have the wrong glasses on. Animation and then slideshow.
There you go.
I didn't see any change. So
Make sure you click on it and then it should say.
Slide down to, there you go.
that's. So I've got resume slideshow.
Well,
The icon down at the lower right.
yep.
Are you using dual monitors? Because slideshow might have opened up on the other monitor.
Oh, yeah.
And see, and I'm looking at the full thing on the second monitor, which I thought I had.
And then I
worked
think you
out.
can just double click on it. Try double clicking on it on your thing over there on the left, screen one, slide one, double click on it.
My goodness, I thought I had this all ready to go.
You probably did.
Zoom is really weird with slideshows when you have
It really
multiple
is.
monitors. It's
It
it's
really
like,
is.
ugh.
Let me try this again. Let's stop the share screen. Let's try this one.
Voila.
Yay!
Wow. All right. Well, that was a really rough start to this.
No,
So,
it's not. Everybody's learning.
Most of you know me, Tom Hubbard, Fire Chief, Aberdeen Fire Department, Interim Fire Chief, Hoquiam Fire Department. Joining me tonight when we get to him is Don Bivens. He is our consultant from Emergency Services International. He has been working on us through the feasibility study and the RFA Planning Committee. Also assisting when we get to the plan is Corey Schmid, who is the Finance Director for the City of Hoquiam. Most of you know her. She's helped out in Aberdeen quite a bit, and she has been integral in the RFA planning process. Also joining, but his video is not on, is Matt Miller, who is the Assistant Chief in Hoquiam Fire Department. So I'm going to work through this as an introduction or a background, and then we'll be handing the presentation over to Don to work through it as well. So as I said, we're going to do a little bit of background. We're going to talk about what a regional fire authority is, what we view as the benefits and the advantages. We'll go over how it's formed. Don will take us step by step through the 10-section RFA plan. And as part of that, Corey will go over the funding and finance section of the plan, and then we'll have time for questions. If you have questions during, please feel free to stop on my part, and then Don will also give you that opportunity as we go through each section. So a little bit of background. August of 2018, Hoquiam had the opportunity due to retirement, and we signed an interlocal agreement between Aberdeen and Hoquiam. And at the time, it was Assistant Chief Rich Malitzi and I provided and have been providing administrative services to the city of Hoquiam since that time. In September of that year, both cities signed a cooperative agreement with Emergency Service Consulting to do a feasibility study to talk about consolidating both fire departments. It's been talked about for years and years and years. This was probably the first true official attempt to bring in an expert consulting firm who has done this many, many times across the state and in other states on bringing together fire departments. Very in-depth process. In October of 2019, ESCI, Don and his team presented to a joint meeting of the Aberdeen and Hoquiam City Councils that took place at the Port of Grays Harbor. They presented to a joint council meeting, and then the next night they presented to a public gathering, which was well attended by the public. January of 2020, ESCI was then contracted by both cities to facilitate a regional fire authority planning committee. At that time, Paul McMillan was elected as the chair. Debbie Ross was the vice chair, and the rest of the committee was Greg Grun, Al Dick, Dan Shaw, and Tani Andros, who have been working very hard for over a year. The first meeting was June 25th of 2020. A little thing called COVID kind of threw a hiccup in the process, but we gathered ourselves and figured out Zoom. And the first meeting was on June 25th, and our final meeting was this last July 8th. It was the 13th official meeting where the RFA committee listed adopted the plan, which brings us to where we are tonight. I just want to say that fire department staff, administrative staff, and the RFA committee has put a lot of work into this. The meetings covered a lot of information, but in the background, we had staff from both fire departments working on operational plans and policies and procedures, and basically reimagineering what a fire service should look like based on our call volume and our challenges and our opportunities. So before I move on, I want to thank the RFA Planning Committee for their attention to everything that we had to present to them. They got to learn firsthand what a modern fire service is currently doing and what we hope to do for the future. And they shared in that vision and gave us really good insight. So I thank them very much. I thank the staff on both sides for all of their work. They put in a lot of time working on response policies and procedures and how do we wrap our minds around a department that will essentially be responding to well over 8,000 calls a year. That's a big workload. And then I definitely want to thank Corey Schmid for her awesome work managing the agendas, the Zoom meetings, and working on the financial package for this. It's been above and beyond, and without her, we couldn't have done it. Patricia has been a help, but with her taking on a new role, it pretty much fell to Corey. So thank you. And then also thank you, Don Bivens, for his excellence and guidance through this whole process. He's been a steadying factor and truly appreciated. So moving on. So what are the benefits of a regional fire authority? So it allows two different governments, in this case, Aberdeen and Hoquiam, to share in administrating and operating a fire department. It allows us some different funding options that aren't currently available to both cities because of the RCWs. It lets the elected officials, in this case, it's the RFA Planning Committee, and then both city councils develop a regional fire department that you have set the standards for, and the standards are contained within our plan. It's our response policies, it's our response times, it's our staffing, it's building a fire department from the ground up. In this document, while it just has the sections, there's background documentation on all the sections that support everything that we put in place. The plan was created and adopted by policymakers, which is the RFA Planning Committee. Our hope is that, well, it's going before you as a workshop tonight. We presented to the Hoquiam workshop last week. The plan is then a joint resolution will come before both councils next week, Hoquiam on Monday, Aberdeen on Wednesday, a resolution with the plan attached. And the goal is for you to adopt the plan, and then it would go to a vote of the public in the November election. So that's the long-term goal of where we're heading with this. So I just want to talk a little about, go back to the feasibility study and some of the findings. That feasibility study is available on the Aberdeen and Hoquiam websites. I know at the time it was created that each council member had a hard copy of the plan. It's a very good, well-written document, and it covers everything that the fire departments in the cities and the dispatch and the hospital and the EMS system are currently going through it, and it breaks it down into strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. It's a really good analysis of where we're going. So breaking down the study into the recommendations, there was essentially four. One was to do nothing, and that is not recommended, but it's always an option. But it was pointed out that both fire agencies are overwhelmed with their call volume. They're struggling to meet demand. Their staffing is struggling. Their ability to meet and be proactive is pretty much non-existent. We're very reactive agencies, which is fine. We're meeting the current need barely, but there's no proactive outreach, and that's huge in my book. That is something I really want to be able to do. The second is contract for services. Either operationally or administratively. As I mentioned, we've done the administrative since 2018. I've been providing fire chief, and Rich was assistant chief. Now Dave Golding, who has assumed that position, is assistant chief. August of last year, Hoquiam Fire and the city of Hoquiam did promote Matt Miller to the position of assistant chief. So essentially 3 of us are running both departments. Matt he's not on here, but I'll make him blush anyway. He's been a godsend. He has picked up a lot of the things that I was letting slip just because my bandwidth had been exceeded. So Matt has been great, and we're working back and forth across Myrtle Street as if Myrtle Street doesn't exist. We're operationally blended at the top, and it's working very well. The third recommendation was a regional fire authority. Well, let me back up to contract for services. That was listed as a, for lack of a better word, a Band-Aid until we could find a more permanent solution, that it would help Hoquiam with the administrative services. It would allow us to start blending services even more than we already had. And so we've achieved that, and it's working well, but it was never meant to be a permanent solution. The third was a regional fire authority, which is why we're here tonight. That was the recommended. The cautious lookout in the feasibility study is they said an RFA takes a lot of work to put in place, which we have experienced, but everybody has done a really nice job of preparing this plan. The fourth option was a municipal fire authority. That is a new structure that is allowed per RCW, but the watch out in the feasibility study is that no one has done that yet in Washington State. And though it's allowed by law, it was cautious of maybe you don't want to be the first because we don't know all the perils and pitfalls. I don't know enough about that. If you have questions later, Don might be able to shed some light, but those were the four options that were presented to us from the feasibility study. So, what are the advantages in our RFA? So economies of scale. We'll have a single point of purchase. We should be able to spread out the purchase of future ambulances and fire apparatus, consolidated medical supplies, all those things with, instead of each agency trying to purchase individually, will experience some economies of scale. There's a new funding mechanism that would exist in what would be known as the Central Grays Harbor Fire Authority, which is the jurisdictional boundaries of Aberdeen and Hoquiam. So the current funding mechanism would change and be reflected in the RFA plan, which we will get to. Services will be enhanced. We'll have more responders. We've already put some of that in motion already without the formation of an RFA. When we have structure fires, we have more units from both cities going. We're managing it as if we are an RFA, but that is in the short term until an RFA is formed. But it's proven that it's better for our citizens, it's safer for our citizens, and it's much safer for our firefighters, and it's a better use of resources. We can hopefully get to incidents, specifically structure fires, with more of a combat force initially, so that fires that maybe are confined to one room or start in one room can be confined to one room without spreading and taking out multiple rooms or destroying the house. And then our number one goal is always life safety, which is the number one goal on any fire. And now we're responding with enough people to effectively make a rescue within the confines of the law. And just segue a little bit, for firefighting, we have to, a minimum on scene to effect rescue inside a burning building is 1 firefighter outside and 2 inside. That's the minimum. We were not achieving that prior to what we've put in place. So that is a huge boon to the citizens, and it's a big safety for us. Our ideally is 2 in, 2 out, but in extreme situations with a known life at risk, we can go 2 in, 1 out. So those are some of the benefits that we're already seeing. And then I mentioned the proactive outreach. We are struggling. COVID definitely didn't help, but we were struggling to get out to the schools, get out to the community, get out to the various organizations to do prevention, because that is really our goal, is preventing incidents from happening, whether they're fire, EMS, disaster response, emergency management, working with the county, working with the deputy director of emergency management, things like that. Those are things that always struggled because we're such a reactive force. That's our primary mission. But we can do so much more. And by heading in this direction, I see great things for this agency. 17 NFPA 1710 is a staffing guideline that's nationally recognized, and they're calling for 4 personnel on an engine and 5 on a ladder truck. The RFA organizational chart we have put together moves us towards that. It doesn't achieve that. There's not a lot of agencies other than the big cities that have achieved that, but it definitely puts us towards that so that a fire engine is arriving with 3 people on it. Thus, we can satisfy that 2 in, 1 out immediately without having to wait for other resources. Pooled resources between Aberdeen and Hoquiam, it will give us more depth. Assistant Chief Miller, in preparing another presentation in our record management system, we can run all sorts of reports, and one of the reports is coinciding calls or calls that are occurring at the same time. Hoquiam was running at about 25 to 30% of the time they've got calls going, and Aberdeen was running 43 to 45% of the time. So that means at any given time we have a call going, we have another call going. So if we have an EMS call going on the north side of the river and our medic unit is engaged, 50% of the time we'll have another call of some sort going. What that means is our personnel are stretched to almost the breaking point that we could, and we're depending on Hoquiam to come our direction, we're going their direction, and there's no such thing as Myrtle Street in the response. So by moving forward with this plan, we're going to increase our depth and our ability to manage multiple calls, major incidents, and bottom line is our service to the public will be greatly improved. Leverage the strength. We're leveraging our apparatus, our facilities, our personnel. Training will improve. And then sustainability, that's the last one. If we're able to move forward with this, it will help us with recruitment and retainment of personnel. We're a very high call volume fire department. Don Bivens can probably allude to that because he has experience with a lot of other agencies. But we're running 15 to 20 calls on an average per shift, which is pretty much nonstop for a fire department, and the average is probably higher. So it'll just allow us to improve our service and take advantage of some efficiencies that we're not achieving now. A little bit more on the sustainability and provision of service. So one of the, in the feasibility study on page 41, it kind of talks about that each department's minimum daily staffing was compared to NFPA and CFAI standards. And CFAI, I had to look it up myself just to make sure, Commission on Fire Accreditation International. And it put in black and white what we already knew anecdotally, is the study found that neither department alone or combined is currently able to independently meet the staffing standard for up to moderate risk incident. And a moderate risk for us would be your standard residential house fire. That's our bread and butter fire. And it was noted that the comparison assumes all the on-duty personnel and response units are available. Well, I already alluded to that we're showing concurrent calls are running 25 to 45% of the time. So while we may have 9 on duty in Aberdeen and 5 on duty at Hoquiam, there's no assurance that they will all be available to respond to the next emergency, and in this case, a structure fire. Where NFPA is telling you that within 8 minutes of receiving the alarm, we should have 15 to 17 personnel on scene to effectively manage the incident, provide for the safety of the public, provide for the safety of the firefighters. So we're always trying to achieve that, because if we can get there in the right amount of time with the right amount of people, then we make the biggest change. We have the biggest success for saving lives, protecting property, and protecting our firefighters. So that is the ultimate goal of this RFA. I just wanted to add, I put a note here. You've all been hearing about the legislative changes that are coming for law enforcement. The caveat to that is we are already seeing it. We're seeing a shift in call volume to the fire service in Aberdeen and Hoquiam. And it's at no fault of law enforcement. We've been meeting with them weekly and daily and trying to wrap our minds around how we're going to handle this. But calls that a month ago were routinely law enforcement calls are now becoming fire service calls. The welfare checks, the people in cars, things like that. So worst case scenario, we could see 1,000 to 2,000 calls come our way starting July 25th. We're hoping that isn't the case, and we're constantly working with Aberdeen Hoquiam Police, but there's too many unknowns and they don't have the answers. So that is just something that we're currently working on. So how is an RFA formed? So the planning committee was formed. There's a resolution by both city councils to form a planning committee, which was adopted. The planning committee was 3 elected officials from each city, and their task was, and for us, was to develop the plan with all the sections you see listed. As I said, each agency, City of Aberdeen and Hoquiam, need to adopt the plan after the RFA committee has adopted the plan. If done so, the plan will go to the vote of the electorate in November, and if approved, the RFA plan is formed. So once the plan is formed and you've approved it, the joint resolution, which will come before both councils next week, calls for a next election, and the county administers that election. Part of our resolution is the language that would be contained in the ballot. That language has been prepared by both Steve Johnson, city attorney for the city of Hoquiam, and Brian Snurr, who is an attorney who has been retained by the RFA Planning Committee and who is pretty much the state, maybe nationally known expert on RCWs, the formation of RFAs and fire districts and all things like that. Simple majority of the voters within the RFA, not by jurisdiction. However, because of our funding mechanism, which we will get to, we will need a 60% supermajority of the voters. So next steps, I'll be handing this over to Don Bivens to go through the plan. Part of our deliverable for the RFA committee and all the committees was to develop a logo. This, after going through committees and then hiring a local graphic design team, was the logo that was designed with the input of the firefighters and then excellent feedback from the graphic designers. So if this was to move forward, this would be the Central Grays Harbor Regional Fire Authority official patch. They tried to capture everything that's important with Aberdeen and Hoquiam, with the trees and the mountains and the colors, and I think they did an excellent job. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing and let Don Bivens take over.
Okay, thank you. Nice job, Chief. I would also like to add my my appreciation for the work that was done in developing the plan by the planning committee themselves, the staffs of the 2 cities, and the firefighters in both organizations. A lot of work went into developing the plan, but there was even more work being done behind the scenes that prop up the individual sections of the plan, which I will go through fairly quickly, but in some level of detail over the next hopefully 45 minutes, maybe a little less. And we'll start, and do we have the plan ready to share? Thank you. We'll start at section 1. Perfect. Section 1 is backgrounds and needs statement. The development of an RFA plan is prescribed by statute. And so we followed the statute in the development of the plan. Section 1 is the background and needs statement. The background, the first 3 bullets under heading A, background, is talking about the feasibility study that was done by both cities and some of the issues that were driving the need to evaluate the potential for the organizations to come together. The needs statement in section B, some of this is taken right out of the statutes, while others, specifically 5, 6, and 7, are talking about issues that came from the feasibility study itself. And some of this will be a little bit repetitive to what the chief said, but really the benefits of moving forward with the fire authority is economies of scale, revenue equity, specific service enhancements, including increasing staffing of 6 line firefighter positions and 1 medical services officer to help manage the EMS program, which is huge and continuing to grow for both organizations. It increases staffing on structure fires. The total complement of firefighters showing up at a structure fire. It will increase the number that each city separately can't deliver. They can do a better job of delivering together. And that has already been implemented, and they're already seeing the benefits of that. It standardizes the EMS response outside of the jurisdiction. Currently, Aberdeen has one approach to EMS responses outside of the city of Aberdeen. Hoquiam has a different approach. This will standardize the EMS response to the region outside of the RFA. It streamlines administrative services and causes the permanent integration of the chief officers that the chief talked about, being the interim fire chief for Hoquiam and the Hoquiam assistant chief assisting and managing the organization. All of that would become permanent in this process. Streamlined command and control at significant events. It just improves the overall incident management of incidents, especially when you have additional resources, sufficient resources to manage the incident coming more quickly. And anticipated decreased cost for apparatus replacement. The chief mentioned ambulances and fire apparatus. And as you buy in bulk, the price drops pretty significantly. In my personal experience, when I retired from the city of Vancouver as the fire chief there, we did a regional approach to purchasing fire apparatus with a standard set of specifications. Everybody agreed to that, and it dropped the per unit cost by $50,000 per unit for every agency involved by having all of those agencies participate. That's a small exam. That was about, I've been retired for 10 years, so that was at least 15 years ago. So the $50,000 is probably larger now, but that's one example of how you can drive costs down through a regional approach, such as a regional fire authority. And as the chief mentioned, deeper response by pooling resources. It allows the organization to bring more resources to bear on a major incident, but also gives both organizations the opportunity to respond to those concurrent calls that occur, and can do so without leaving the urban core empty when those incidents occur. It allows you to bring more resources to bear on the emergencies, and it improves sustainability of the organization going forward. Any questions on section 1? Okay. Section 2 is just definitions. It's really intended to give laypersons a sense of when we start talking about the governing board or the governance board or the board, what that actually means, an effective date, and all of the terms that we toss around that can cause laypersons confusion. We define it in section 2. Nothing earth shattering there, pretty standard fare. Section 3 addresses the formation authority. The first section is the statutory authority to form a regional fire authority, which is spelled out here in subsections 1 and 2. The planning committee authority for section B, it specifically tells the regional fire authority planning committee what its authorities and responsibilities are. And they have essentially performed almost all of them. They've developed the RFA plan. They've approved the RFA plan to be submitted to both cities' full councils for consideration. And then the RFA plan approval authority is where we're at now, where the plan is submitted to both cities separately. Both city councils look at the plan, and if they concur, they pass by joint resolution that plan and refer it to the voters of both the city of Hoquiam and the city of Aberdeen for approval. Because of the funding mechanism, as the chief pointed out, this does require a supermajority, so it requires 60% approval. I will say that it is 60% of all of those casting a vote in Aberdeen and Hoquiam as a combined group. So it can pass in Aberdeen and fail in Hoquiam, and if the total of the two still add up to 60%, it passes. So it's not by jurisdiction, it's for the entire regional fire authority, 2 cities combined. And then point 3 is the actions that the RFA Planning Committee needs to take, which is the benefit charge, and I'm jumping ahead using a term that you're not familiar with yet, at least most of you. There is a requirement that there be public hearings for benefit charges and for the establishment of benefit charge, and the RFA Planning Committee would be responsible for either doing that or making sure that that occurs. And we'll define what benefit charge is a little bit later on in the process. Any questions in section 3? Okay. Section 4, jurisdictional boundaries. Nothing real exciting here. It simply defines what the RFA boundaries would be. And the RFA boundaries follow the outside diameter or outside the boundary of the city of Hoquiam and the city of Aberdeen as if the 2 cities were one. That is the jurisdiction that we're talking about. That is what the RFA would cover. During the life of the RFA, there can be changes to jurisdictional boundaries after the RFA is formed. The first sub-bullet under B identifies that annexations by either city, either Hoquiam or Aberdeen, automatically by that annexation become part of the RFA. So as the cities expand, the RFA automatically expands in those circumstances. However, the RFA can also independently annex unincorporated areas, and that wouldn't have any effect on the cities, on either city at all. And then ultimately, the RFA may, down the road, annex other fire jurisdictions, neighboring fire jurisdictions, with the assent and agreement of those agencies. They can annex those areas and incorporate them into the regional fire authority. There may be some need for some modifications to the RFA if that were to occur. But one of the things that I'm going to talk about in section 5 is that if there were a fire agency that was annexed into the regional fire authority, you would have to restructure the RFA plan to factor those folks into the system. But if you contract with those agencies, there's a provision for an elected official from that agency becoming a non-voting member on the RFA governing board. And I'll talk about that in section 5, which is next. Any questions on section 4? Okay. Section 5. This is the governance structure of the Regional Fire Authority. We had lots and lots of discussion about this, went back and forth on a couple of different iterations. Ultimately, I think we landed on simple is better. And so, although some would argue this may not be all that simple, it does state that there will be a 5-member governing board for the RFA. There will be 1 governing board member that'll be a currently seated elected official from the city of Aberdeen as appointed by the mayor and confirmed by council. So one of the city council members would be appointed to the governing board from the city of Aberdeen. That will be a non-voting advisory position. The same thing would happen in the city of Hoquiam. A currently seated elected official from Hoquiam would be appointed by the mayor and confirmed by the city council. That will also be a non-voting advisory board member or advisory member. Then when we get to the full voting positions, the other 3, one would be a governing board member that would be elected from the citizens from people. My brain is not working quite right tonight. They are registered voters. How difficult was that? Registered voters and elected would be elected from the city of Aberdeen, and that person would initially serve a 4-year term. That would be a full voting member of the governing board. There would be also a new governing board member elected from the citizens of the city of Hoquiam. That would be serving an initial term of 6 years. That is also a full voting member of the RFA governing board. And then the 5th and final position is an at-large position that can come either city. It just has to be from within the combined jurisdiction of the RFA without regard to the city of residence. And that would be a position for 2 years. That would be a full voting member. So the 5-member board would have 2 non-voting advisory board positions and 3 full voting full members. And after the initial term of the full voting members is served, then they run for re-election, and each election is then a 6-year term. So that forces a staggered term for each of the governing board positions, so you don't end up with multiple people leaving at the same time and having brain drain from the governing board. And as I mentioned in section 4, which is specifically addressed in section 5, if any other agencies outside of the RFA were to be contracting to receive full services from the RFA, then an elected member from that agency, assuming it'd be a fire district or it may be a city, would have 1 non-voting advisory board at the table with the RFA governing board. Questions about section 5? Okay. Section 6, I'm going to turn over to Corey Schmid, who it did all of the work on the funding and finance section for the plan.
Okay, so bear with me. I know that numbers can get confusing, so I'll do my best. Okay, so when it comes to the RFA, we really came up with a very generic budget as to what expenses would look like for the RFA the next couple of years if it were to form. And then from there, we were able to figure out the revenues needed to be able to fund the RFA. So first of all is just your regular basic property tax. With that, so the property tax is just like your regular property tax. It would take, so regular property tax would take $1 away from the city and go to the RFA. An EMS levy would be a 50 cent per thousand assessed value. A benefit charge. So this is the new one that a lot of citizens or councils aren't aware of. And a benefit charge is a charge based upon the amount of fire flow that it would take to like put out a fire at your house. So it's based upon the structure size of your house, AKA the square footage of your home. Transport fees, that's just your regular ambulance billing. Your ambulance utility fee. This is the fee that you currently are seeing right now on your water, sewer, and storm bill through the cities. And that would continue to be processed through the cities. And then the monies would then be provided to the RFA. Service contracts. These are just the same contracts that we have. So Aberdeen, you guys have some with the outlying districts for the coverage that you provide. So those would continue, and Hoquiam has some as well. Fire impact and mitigation fees. This is actually not a fee that we're not currently looking at doing, and we don't do. It would be on the city side. If the city were to implement these fees, then a portion of it would go to the RFA. So plan or permit plan review and inspection fees. These are, so the cities have in their municipal codes, they have guidelines that people have to follow in relation to fire. So if the RFA were to come and do like a sprinkler inspection, the RFA could charge fees for those services. So I'm going to bring up a spreadsheet. So let's see. Can everybody see that? Is it sharing? No?
No.
Oh, well, that's fun. Okay,
And the other person didn't, Don didn't stop sharing his screen, so.
I wasn't sharing. It was all
Oh,
being
gotcha.
shared for me.
yeah, so you're right. So no, it's me. So hold on. I will. Hold on. So I'm going to stop sharing this and I'm going to switch to the spreadsheet. Here we go. Okay. So here is the, let me make it a little bit bigger. Here's the budget that I was discussing. So when it comes to revenues, these 2019 to 2020, those are actual figures. Ground emergency medical GEMT funds, those are funds that we're currently getting. We are unsure how long these funds will actually last. So we hate to rely on them, but we did include them. EMS services, that would be for ambulance billing. And then ambulance and emergency aid fees. Sorry, contracted EMS services. Those are our contracted services that we're currently providing. And then ambulance emergency aid fees would be the ambulance billing transports. Here is under expenditures. You have 2019 and 2020. Those are actual expenditures for both cities combined. And then 2021, that's the actual budget for both cities. 2022 to 2025, those are just very rough estimated budget figures. So from them, looking at the revenues that we're currently taking in and the expenditures that are budgeted, you can see that there was a deficit. So From there, we put in the regular property tax at $1 per thousand. And like I said, that the regular property tax would not increase for your average citizen, or would not increase for anyone, because the dollar is actually moving from the city to the RFA. The EMS levy is 50 cents per thousand. And then the benefit charge. So the benefit charge, you're able to ask for up to 60% of your operating expenditures. They recommend, this is where it gets confusing, they recommend only requesting to start out 30 to 40%, because as the assessed value goes up, you create a gap in your property taxes as to what you, because you can only increase by 1% every year. And so until the RFA would be able to do a lid lift, they can use the benefit charge to fill in that gap of revenues. But as you can see, even with the property tax, EMS levy, and benefit charge, there was still a difference. And so with that, we took the estimated amount of residents that are currently paying an ambulance availability fee for Hoquiam and Aberdeen, and came up with an availability fee calculation. So again, please keep in mind that these are very generic figures. We just wanted to give you guys a view as to what this would look like. So then if I come over to an example, so let's focus on Aberdeen. Please note that your average home is going to be example 3, or around example 3. So here I have example 1, 2, 3. As you know, I have the square footage and the assessed value. The square footage is there for the benefit charge. So remember, the benefit charge is based upon the square footage of a home, so the amount of resources it takes to put out a fire at the structure. So you'll have, so current costs, you'll see like a regular levy is for a City of Aberdeen citizen is $291. For an ambulance utility fee, they're currently paying $286, total $577. And this is, so for future costs, the city regular levy would decrease by $1. So it would be $184.33 for the city portion, and $106.77 for the RFA basic levy. Then you would add in the EMS levy at 50 cents per 1,000, the benefit charge, and then the ambulance availability fee, which would come up with an increase of $317 a year. Okay. So does anybody have any questions in regards to this before I take down this and go back to the Word document or the plan? No, and please, oh, so go ahead.
Well, I we'll wait and see how this all works out, but the question that we're going to get is how much more am I going to pay for all this? I mean, from constituents, taxpayers. So.
And that was the that was the $316 for an example 3. Yeah. So, and I, you know, I'm more than willing, if anybody wants any more detailed information, I am more than willing to sit down with any of you and go over the information and provide as much detail as you want. I can also send this out, and I can send out the revenue expenditure trend that I did just for viewing purposes. And again, please reach out and ask questions. I'm more than happy to answer or do my best to answer whatever I can. So, any other questions before I jump back over? Okay, jumping back over. Sorry, I know this, don't get dizzy. Okay, so transfer of assets. So city, everybody can see this again, right? The plan. Okay.
Yeah.
So transfer of assets. So it would be Everything would be transferred as of July 1st, 2022. Appendix D does have all the assets listed. When it comes to all reserved earmarked funds, so that would be all the funds in the ambulance fund. The ambulance fund, those are funds that are restricted that the city holds for EMS. So those would transfer over to the RFA. Thank you to Margot for reviewing this and catching number 3. So all reports, documents, surveys. This is just pretty much just saying any records that the city has right now in relation to the fire department, that the RFA can have access to those if needed. So pretty straightforward public records. If a public records issue comes up, or hopefully we'll all have a friendly relationship and be willing to share the documents. So yeah. Okay, all assets will be transferred as just how their condition currently is. Liabilities, when it comes to liabilities, so the debt will stay with the cities. So if there is a fire, a ladder truck or ambulance or any type of bond in relation to the cities that the citizens have voted on, that will stay with the appropriate cities. And then when it comes to left one retiree medical, that will stay with the cities as well. They were city employees, and so it is the city's responsibility to carry on that cost. Compensated absences. So that is any absences or so that's any accrued leave that employees have accrued, that if they were like anyone that could possibly retire, that would be a cost for the RFA. So the cities would have to be able to provide that, and which the city should be recognizing that as a debt anyways, and should be able to help the RFA or transfer restricted funds over for that cost. And that's pretty much it for funding and finance. I know it's a lot of information to gather in just one little brief spiel, but does anyone have any questions? If you don't have questions right now, please reach out and talk to me. I am more than happy to go over whatever I can in detail with you.
Corey, this is Mayor Shave. I think this is a good spot for me to comment. You or Don can correct me if I'm wrong, but with Alan's question and concern, I'm sure that's what we're going to hear a lot, just what Alan said. But one of the things that I've been saying from the beginning, we've heard how the current track that both cities' fire departments are on is unsustainable.
Correct.
And that we need to do something to correct that. And by producing the RFA, even though it's not going to make things cheaper, it's going to make a better service out of our fire departments, as well as make them sustainable. And for me, that says it all. That's the big thing for me. So, I mean, I'm real happy with having our ambulance not very far away. And as I've always called it, an emergency room on wheels, and it's very handy. I'd like to keep it. So, but that's with Alan's comment and so on. That's what my main concern or answer to that.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I think that's well said. I think once you come to grips with the fact that both fire departments are staffed anemically, and there needs to be an infusion of resources so that the departments can actually meet the demands for their respective communities. When you come to that understanding and that conclusion, there's going to be a cost associated with that. So that cost increase is likely coming to the citizens of both cities whether you form a regional fire authority or not. It's whether or not you capture the efficiencies of combining and the economies of scale of combining and the depth and pooling of resources. Those are the things that come along with funding the fire department to a more sustainable level. Having fire departments running the number of calls the organization is currently running with the people that it has and the tax base that is in place to support it, you'd be hard pressed to find any other organization in the state that is doing more with less than Aberdeen and Hoquiam.
And again, if any of you have any questions, please reach out to me. I know that, so at the next council meeting, we're going to be asking the council to pretty much approve this plan and pass a resolution for us to be able to put this out to the voters. So please reach out and ask questions now. I'm more than happy, again, I can't repeat myself enough. I'm more than happy to provide any knowledge or anything that I can to help educate you on this. Even if you want to know the costs for your own house, so that way you have an idea and maybe that can help you understand it a little bit more, I would be more than happy to provide that. Again, these are very rough estimated figures, but we just wanted to give you an idea as to what it was going to look like.
Really quick, I just have a quick question. You're mentioning residential properties a lot. Do any of these fees apply to commercial properties?
Yes, so really good question. Yes, they apply to commercial properties. The benefit charge is the one, so if you have a sprinkler system and it is inspected by the fire department, sorry, I can't think today, inspected by the fire department, approved by the fire department or the RFA, you get a 10% discount. There are a lot of exemptions when it comes to the fire benefit charge. The cities are actually not exempt. Port is not exempt, but churches and pretty much any education related. So any school districts, the college is the big one that is exempt, but you can negotiate with them. So I believe the idea is, yeah, low-income housing. There's a lot of exemptions when it comes to the benefit charge. And also, there is which I don't have a lot of knowledge on this, I will admit, but there is a senior low income discount program for property taxes, and you will get the discount. I mean, you'll get the, so if you qualify for that, you will get the discount on the benefit charge and all the regular property or all the property taxes as well.
Correct.
Hey, Corey, how does the benefit charge get calculated just for properties that don't have any dwellings on them?
So if there is no structure, it is zero.
It has to be an improved property.
Correct.
Okay.
Good question.
I can envision coming at you with my 30 pages of questions, and if I have to buy you lunch or whatever.
That's fine. I mean, you don't buy me lunch. I'm on a strict diet, but come into my office. You can bring your own lunch and we can go over it.
Okay, yeah, and you're in. I'm thinking as a constituent, backing up just a second, that to get the 60%, we're going to have to sell this, and the benefits of an RFA, I'm sold on that. I understand that, but to get 60%, we're going to have to be able to answer all of the voters' questions, probably in radio interviews and all this other stuff. And I want to get all of those kind of facts straight and, neatly packaged so we can do this.
Yes, and that's why I'm stressing for all of you to reach out to me and ask questions, especially when it comes to the finance side. And I could probably answer a lot of the other questions as well. If not, I have Chief Hubbard and Assistant Chief Miller on call at all times. So, but please reach out to me and educate yourself so that we can sell this and can make this work, because both cities need this. As Dawn has stressed, that both cities are anemic right now and it's unsustainable the way that we're operating. So this is our solution.
Sorry. Chief Hubbard, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but one of the, I think we all entered into this kind of intuitively, you know, thinking, oh, consolidation, we're going to save money, woohoo, you know, finally at long last. But the fact of the matter is we waited so long to do this that we have continued, how I have started to look at this, and is that we have continued to offer our residents an extremely high level of service at a very high cost to the professional staff that we have. Neither city alone can afford to bring each department up to the level it needs to be at to have a department that doesn't push people to the max and offers the kind of service people have come to expect, but together it will cost less to float all boats. So neither of us can afford to do it alone, but together we can, it would cost, it's starting to look more affordable. So that's where the savings come in, because neither city can really continue to operate at the level we are and make it work.
Well, and yeah, you're 100% right. I would add on also following Lisa Scott's comprehensive land use plan. We all have great hope for the harbor, for Aberdeen and Hoquiam. We have great hope for growth. This will position the fire departments to meet that growth, expand with the growth, and be ready for what's to come. You know, I have family in Idaho, and Boise is not a great example to compare us to because it's a big city in Boise, but she lived in Boise, and 4 miles outside of the city limits, we were riding our bikes and there's this brand new fire station, brand new, not occupied. And I said, what's up with that? They knew that development was coming that direction and they put a fire station in place ready for that. And 4 years later, it was completely surrounded. I don't envision we will ever get there, but that's the kind of forward thinking that we as Harborites need so that we're building and meeting the needs of the citizen. And I would agree with you. I will put the services of both Aberdeen and Hoquiam fire departments up against any fire department in this state and across the country, because I've been back to the fire academy. A lot of our people have, and we know systems, and our citizens get a class 1 fire response and EMS, really highly trained and motivated people providing fire and emergency medical, and we just need to support them and support the people as we do that. So yeah, I would agree. I will defend these two agencies' delivery of service against anyone. Thurston County, for the whole county, they run 5 paramedic units, and we're staffing paramedics on pretty much every unit that goes out of the departments when we can. So the level of care is not exceeded by anyone in the state, including Seattle.
So when you say savings, Deanne, one of the things that hasn't even been brought up is redundancies and efficiencies. This is only the beginning. If we vote this in and support it, it's only the beginning. These two fire departments moving together like this creates a whole new a whole new world of cooperation and efficiencies, as well as there are redundancies because they are separate fire departments, and some of them redundancies can be eliminated at a savings.
And some of those will occur over time.
Yes.
Yeah, my experience has been that we tried to anticipate in my career, the city of Vancouver and the neighboring fire district combined, and they were roughly the same size when they combined. We tried to anticipate what the efficiencies were. We weren't very conservative in our estimates of what those efficiencies might be, but the efficiencies we actually experienced 3 years after consolidation were mind-boggling. We could not have anticipated them until we actually experienced the opportunities. So you will find some efficiencies that you'll be hard pressed to identify today, but will become glaringly clear after a year or two of experience of the two organizations being one.
Councilmember Richrod is right, though. We do have to get our talking points in order. And we can do that.
Is there a budgeted projection for if it doesn't go through that we could use for a comparison? Like, let's say for $600 is going up to $900 with the RFA, but what happens without it? Is there something that we can just say, this is the difference?
So Councilmember Francie, I had that same question, and I think that's a fair question, but I would just say at this point, the whole entire effort has been in putting together a solid plan. And now that's probably a fair question to maybe ask and see how that can be addressed, but no, that's not been looked at in any detail yet.
And I think the key part is just that current services, I mean, like Don said, that they're not sustainable. So, I mean, who knows how far down the line do you actually, like, do we have to stop and evaluate the services that we're providing? I mean, that could possibly come into question at some point in time. I'm not saying right now or in the future, in the near future, but at some point in time that could happen.
And it's difficult to identify what's the cost in dollars if you don't form a fire authority, because one of the options is an opportunity cost. You can actually devolve your services and keep the cost the same. You can eliminate your EMS system and reduce demand to your fire departments and potentially keep the cost the same. I would venture to guess there isn't much interest in that from either city, either at the council or from the community standpoint, but those are legitimate options you could consider. We're not recommending it. Ready to move on to section 7? Okay. Section 7 is the organizational structure. This is the people side of things. The RFA plan calls for Chief Hubbard to continue to be the fire chief for the RFA going forward. So he would be the one fire chief for the two cities, which now form into one regional fire authority. All of the personnel in both fire departments would be transferred to the RFA. All employment agreements that are in effect now would be carried over into the RFA unless they were negotiated differently through this process. And in fact, there is discussion going on right now between legal counsel for the RFA Planning Committee and the Hoquiam Firefighters Local and the Aberdeen Firefighters Local to come to an MOU, an understanding of what the working situation will be like going forward if the RFA is formed. What does that employment agreement look like so that you have everybody working under one agreement instead of two separate? And the Labor Management Committee that is currently in place in Aberdeen, and I'm not sure if it's in place in Hoquiam, but the agreement is that the labor management process would continue because it's a constructive and valuable process to keep labor management relations positive. And that was actually a strong desire that labor expressed. And Chief Hubbard expressed it as well. It's an important component. Policies for the RFA are currently being revised to anticipate the RFA formation. Mission and vision and values for the RFA will be done once the RFA is formed. That's actually in the plan. There are certain support functions of the RFA that it makes no sense for the RFA to try to start up on day one when the infrastructure is already in place in Aberdeen and Hoquiam, or potentially from private sector third-party services. So the plan calls for the RFA to enter into administrative contracts with human resource functions, finance functions, IT, risk management, fleet management, facility maintenance, and EMS billing. There are likely other services as well. But the plan calls for the RFA to start engaging, or in this case, the fire department administration to start engaging with the various department heads from both cities in these disciplines to determine what they would be able to do and what it would cost the RFA for them to provide that service. The expectation is that that contract would be for the midterm, maybe 3 years, and giving the RFA some time to get its legs under it and financially be in a position to bring those support functions in-house. But it's also possible that the RFA may decide that, gee, the contract is working really well. Let's not mess with success. Let's continue the contracts. And they would have contracts with Aberdeen for one service, Hoquiam for another service, private sector, third party for IT services, for example. Those are options that the fire department will start engaging with those department heads to flush out what the options are. As mentioned in section 6, the left one liability is retained by the cities. The civil service, the plan calls for the Aberdeen Civil Service Commission to be the civil service commission for the RFA until such time as Central Grays Harbor Fire Authority is able to develop its own civil service commission, in which case they would stand up their own, and Aberdeen Civil Service would be law enforcement only in that case for the city of Aberdeen. Central Grays Harbor Fire Authority will contract with Aberdeen for benefits from the Northwest Firefighters Benefit Trust. Again, unless there is some negotiated agreement to do something different. And on section 6, I want to point out seamless transition. The point here is that there are a million little nuts and bolts that make the Aberdeen Fire Department what it is, make the Hoquiam Fire Department what it is. We try to capture the big chunks, but we don't want to ignore the small details. And so the philosophy here is that if the plan is silent to a particular small detail, the overall philosophy is that there's to be a seamless transition from what's in place today to an RFA going forward. And then the asset transfers are all listed in an appendix in the back of the report, and it's very, very detailed. Any questions about section 7?
Mr. Bivens?
Yes.
So I would just interrupt here real quick and say that asset transfer took you, all of 15 seconds to share with us. But this again is where the labor management team and all the work that took place I mean, there's our Aberdeen and Hoquiam fire department staffs did an enormous amount of work. I mean, I think they counted paper clips. Everything is been accounted for. And it was an amazing process to watch these two departments come together and work together and bring us everything we could possibly need. So it's I hope everybody looks at that asset transfer list because it's pretty impressive.
Thank you for pointing that out. As the outside consultant coming in, I only hope that staff work occurs between meetings. I was very, very pleasantly surprised when prior to the next meeting, after the assignment for the compilation of the assets, that the chief presented all of the staff work that his organization, all of the men and women in the two fire departments expended to develop a very detailed asset transfer list. That, frankly, that doesn't happen very often. A consultant can only hope, but in this particular case, it happened. And it's just one of many examples of the staff doing incredible yeoman's work, bringing that level of detail forward that you may not, as you point out, I spent 15 seconds talking about it, but I'm confident it took many more than 15 hours of multiple people compiling information from various stations, various apparatus to come up with that list. Okay, section 8, operations and services. For fire protection services, this basically lays out that there is a staffing model and standards, response performance standards that are included in a companion document to the RFA plan that identifies additional firefighters, the additional medical services officer, and the response performance components of this plan. This plan references that document, and be happy to provide, well, the chief already has it, I'll just have that, but if you would like to see the details of that document, I think you could ask the chief and he could provide that to you. And chief, if you need help with that, let me know. Automatic aid and mutual aid exists in both cities and would continue going forward until such time as there is a master agreement that applies to both cities and all of the agencies that both cities rely on for mutual and automatic aid. And there again, you see seamless transition to reinforce that point. Any questions for section 8? Only 2 more sections. Section 9, ambulance transport services. This talks about the authority to provide ambulance services. Section B, activity and operation, is virtually almost identical to the fire portion of the previous section, talking about staffing models and standards, response deployment, and so on and so forth. But then it goes into the EMS billing portion. It states that the RFA will have the obligation to establish a cost of service study in the first year of the RFA's existence. And from that cost of service study, the fees for service would be adjusted based on that cost of service study findings. And until that occurs, the agreement is that the flat fee that Aberdeen is currently using for ambulance transport services for other agencies outside of the city would continue to be the method of billing until that cost of service study is complete. Questions about the ambulance service? Last section, community risk reduction, which is a relatively new term in the fire service. It used to be fire prevention, it used to be emergency management, it used to be public education. Now it kind of rolls up under the heading of community risk reduction. How do we minimize the risk the communities face? How do we engage the community and help them help themselves? How do we as an organization position ourselves to provide those services? That's what community risk reduction means. So the authority for community risk reduction is specified in statute in the first section. The second section talks about fire prevention, specifically code enforcement and management. The fire marshal of the RFA is expected to partner with both cities' legal departments and building departments regarding the fire and life safety codes of both cities. The fire marshal will recommend action on new construction pursuant to the municipal codes of both cities. The fire marshal will work with the city legal departments for both cities regarding code enforcement issues and enforcement after the fact. The fire marshal's office will conduct all fire investigations and will work closely with the Aberdeen PD and Hoquiam PD to perform that function. The will provide public education and risk reduction strategies and education to both cities and their constituents. And under emergency management, the fire marshal's office or Central Grays Harbor RFA will work on behalf of and represent the fire perspective for both cities to the comprehensive emergency management plan. They will be responsible for providing feedback for both cities to the county emergency manager on the CEMP annexes and the department or operational plans and all disaster services for both cities. Questions about section 10? The rest of the plan is all appendices that support the earlier sections and are fairly self-explanatory. I'd be happy to answer any individual questions. Anything that the council has now, I'd be happy to answer questions on. If you, as Corey said, if you have questions after the fact, please feel free to reach out to me. I'd prefer that you deal first with your staff internally, but if you need support beyond that, maybe through your staff, they can reach out to me and I can provide some assistance. That's it for me.
Thank you, Don, very much.
You bet.
So Dan, that concludes our presentation. Mayor Shave has his hand up. I'll just wrap up by saying that I'm in the process of preparing the resolution, which will have the plan attached that will be on the next council agenda for discussion, and I'll give it back to the mayor.
Thank you. Councilmember Short had her hand up. Usually go with council members first. Sorry, Pete.
Sorry, Pete. That document is really interesting to read and easy to read. And it shows a lot of work. Anyhow, my question, if not November for this plan and a November vote, then when will it come up? And what difference does it make?
So our goal is, as I expressed during when I was talking, is that for our goal is to have councils pass this, a joint resolution next council meeting.
Right.
And then we can put it on the November ballot. But worst case scenario, the councils don't pass it. Fingers crossed everybody does. But if they don't, then we get pushed to the February ballot.
Does that make a big difference?
It does.
It does.
We talked
How
about
so?
that.
It has, Don, I think it has to do with the amount of voters that come out to vote. And
To get a 60% super majority, it's statistically pretty difficult to do that in a February ballot issue like this. So it is really essential that we try to get it on this November ballot.
And not only that, it's significantly more expensive to be put on the February ballot than it is for the November ballot. I'm talking thousands of dollars.
And that were there also some fiscal considerations on when people adopt budgets and how you do a transition and the timing of that, if we're well into the next year, makes it difficult to set up the timing of budgets and how taxes are working, how it gets assigned and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, that definitely I don't think that's a big piece, but that definitely plays a part into it. And please, also, I don't think I really explained this during my presentation, but so if it goes to vote, and even if the fire authority, its effective date is July 1st, 2022, they won't collect property taxes until 2023. So there is a little bit of a time frame for citizens to kind of absorb this cost a little bit, or find a way to absorb the cost. I'm not saying that's going to make it easy. I'm just saying that there's a little bit of a cushion time-wise when it comes to the costs being allocated out to the citizens.
Thank you.
Just lengthens the.
Dawn, did you want to also speak to the timing for electing the voting members of the board? That was something that we did some research on, and that they may benefit from hearing.
Yeah. If you don't have to elect the governing board members at the same time the RFA question is presented to the citizens. If the citizens are presented the RFA in November and it passes, then you can have a subsequent election for the governing board members at the next election cycle. If you have the RFA happening in February, then the people running for the governing board positions would have to run in a special election in April. And that's really, I believe that's the only window they would have to be elected to the governing board before the formation of the RFA takes effect, which is July 1st, July of 2022.
So Mayor Shea.
Mr. Mayor?
Could you speak to the early in the process RFA team's discussion about Aberdeen's fire stations in the analysis that was done about Hoquiam and Aberdeen's fire stations and the debt service about the fire stations?
Yes, I think I know what you're talking about. Ultimately, the facilities, the fire facilities for Aberdeen are reflective of deferred maintenance. Let's say it that way. To the extent that they are really a liability. And my understanding is that the city of Aberdeen is moving forward to address that issue. And you're addressing that issue through a bond issue. That's my understanding. And if you pass a bond issue, then the same folks who voted to authorize that bond are responsible for paying that bond down going forward. The bond doesn't get transferred to the RFA. The bond stays with, in Hoquiam's case, they've got apparatus that are bonded. That will stay with Hoquiam. The fire station bonds, if approved in Aberdeen, will stay with Aberdeen.
Thank you. I just wanted to get your thoughts on that. Early on, I remember analysis done by the RFA determined that the Aberdeen fire stations needed to be replaced. And
yeah, I was being kind when I said deferred maintenance.
So,
I didn't want to offend anybody.
So we're working
I
on
don't
that,
think
but
there's
I,
deferred maintenance. We've maintained them far longer than they're used to.
Yeah.
absolutely.
Well said. Well said.
Thank you.
Mhm.
So do any other council members have any questions? Councilmember Ross. I just wanted to mention, this has been an incredible process this whole year that we've been meeting, and I've really, really thoroughly enjoyed it. And I am so impressed with how hard the staff and the firefighters worked to put this together. Mr. Bivens indicated earlier, that he was pleasantly surprised with the information that they provided at each meeting, and they just did an incredible job. So I say kudos to the staffs of both cities and the firefighters of both cities. Great job. And I'm very pleased with the product that we came up with. Thank you. Councilmember Andrews.
Yeah, I agree with what Debbie said. Both Aberdeen and Hoquiam, they just came together so seamlessly and so quickly. Both departments, it was just, there was nothing. If there was any animosity or anything, they didn't show any of that to us. Everything they presented to us was, together and seamless. And I just hope we can get maybe a list of talking points that we can, both councils can, maybe some type of highlight. Maybe that's something that the group can do. I was just thinking that just hearing the questions from the other council members, that maybe we need to put together a highlight list of what the benefits are and stuff for everybody so everybody's giving out the same message.
I think that's an excellent idea.
I second that.
And we are going to have to sell it. We're going to have to sell it. So
Yeah, this was amazingly not simple, but it was amazingly understandable. That if you could reliably spell RFA but nothing else, I understand how this all works now. And what a job you guys did. That's great.
Well, like Councilmember Ross and Andrews said, it was our chief and his staffs in Aberdeen and Hoquiam, because, as council members, we don't often we talk about what great departments and great employees we have, but most of the time is Chief Hubbard bending our ear. We don't oftentimes get to see the staff at work. And man, if you could have sat through some of the presentations they did for us and how they rolled it out, it just I came away like Councilmember Ross and Andrews, very, very impressed and proud of what our departments are trying to bring to the table in looking for our support to make this happen. So yes, we can put some more effort into making sure our public sees it in the same positive way that the departments are hoping they will. So Councilman Chief Hubbard.
So on that, Matt Miller has started putting together a public presentation PowerPoint. It captures a lot of my original slides, but it breaks it down for the public to understand. I would also I've been talking to Corey about it and Steve Johnson, because this will be a new arena for me on how do I go out. Let me back up. I know that I will go out and talk about the benefits of the RFA. I will not go out and tell people how to vote, because that's a violation of some law somewhere. We will be putting out informational, frequently asked question pamphlets that don't tell people what they should do, but it outlines the benefits. What I would like to do, and I need to get with the RFA Planning Committee, is to utilize the same firm that developed our logo. They're standing in the wings ready to help us with professional publications of those documents. They're a local company. They've done that for other entities in Grays Harbor, and we've already got pricing. So I won't just pull the trigger on that, but we probably need to convene or get a consensus from the RFA Planning Committee, if it moves through both councils, that we're providing the information, but this company will do an outstanding job of preparing and publishing materials that we can go out to the public. So that's my plan moving forward if we get that.
Thank you. Any other council members? Well, it is 9:35 p.m. and I'm sure we're all ready to say our goodbyes. So with that, seeing no further questions, I'm going to adjourn our workshop. Good night, everybody, and thanks for your time and patience.
Thank you.
Good night, everybody.
Thanks, Don.
You bet.